so we're officially rolling. So just so you know, everybody, that sort of a number of ways that we can communicate with each other. We can obviously speak to each other. Right now I have everybody muted, but if you look at the bottom left of your screen, you'll see a little microphone button that has a red slash through it. If you are muted and do not want to be muted, you can unmute yourself, and I will unmute everybody in a moment. I just usually do it when folks are coming in because there's often a lot of activity and it can be hard to hear. But you can always do that. You can also turn your video on and off if you feel you need to. There's a camera icon also down at the bottom, and if it's got a red slash through it, we can't see you. If it doesn't, we can. And as you may have seen already, where there's a chat window. So one of the things that Zoom has is a chat functionality. Down at the bottom of your screen as well, there's a little chat bubble that says chat. If you click on that, it will open up the chat window. And every time somebody enters a message, it'll flash orange. You have the option to leave it open the whole time if you want. You can also minimize it or close it entirely so you don't have to see it. And the way you do that is if you're looking at the chat window, there's a little down arrow on the left-hand side. If you click on it, you'll see close, minimize, or pop out. And that is sort of the way that it will work. So I am now going to unpin my video so that essentially what Zoom does is it switches to everybody, whoever is giving the most input at the moment. You'll see that person big, you'll see everyone else small at the top. Welcome everybody to Differentiated Instruction. I'm glad to have you all here. I thought it might be nice to just do a quick start by just going through. Some of us know each other, some of us teach at the same places, some of us don't. And just tell us, very briefly, your name, where and what you teach. And what brought you here today. So I'm just going to go in the order that I see on my screen. So I will call on you. You're always welcome to pass if you need to. So why don't we go ahead and start with Christine. Tell us about yourself. I'm unmuted.
All right. Yeah, I'm Christine Rocha, and I'm at Temple Sinai, and I teach the 3 years old.
Great.
What else do you need to know? Yeah.
What brought you here today?
Not all of them, Anna.
Sorry?
What brought you here today?
I was looking for it. Honestly, yeah, it's understanding more about challenging behaviors and kind of getting to learn more, like figuring out what goes in the classroom and addressing issues, having a different understanding of how to approach children with the challenging behaviors.
Okay. Great. So today will be less about behaviors proper and a little bit more about how we teach to different kinds of learners, but it definitely is related. There will be other behaviors, other sessions later. A lot of people here sign up for all of them. So, we'll have a lot of opportunity to talk about behaviors. And, sometimes one of the things that we find is that when we're able to teach kids in sort of the ways that work for them, some of the behaviors go away. So certainly in terms of that, this will probably help with that agenda. Okay, so I have someone here who I saw wave a minute ago. The name says I plus ITHT N6 X plus N9BZ.
Oh, that's me. Hello.
That's you. So tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I work at Gamma Tov, and I used to be with your daughter Noah for a little bit. Hey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just excited to learn how to help some of the kids that I've met over the years that have some needs that are challenging for me. Yeah.
Great. Glad to have you here. Nice to see you again. Sorry, when your picture was small, I didn't recognize you as well. All right, Bob, you're up.
Bob. I work at Temple Sinai. Oh, hold on. I am unmuted.
I just unmuted you.
Okay.
Ashley, I'm going to rename you Ashley.
Bob, I work at Temple Sinai.
Thank you.
Huh? Nickname me?
I'm sorry. I was just telling Ashley I'm renaming her so we all can remember her name.
Ashley?
Go on.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I work at Temple Sinai Preschool. Christine, I'm the support teacher between the threes. And I'm taking this class. They made me do it. No, I'm just kidding. Just to, broaden my horizon, and like Christine said, learn to how to assist these children when they need a little extra assistance, or just all children in general.
Okay, Great. Glad to have you. Ashley, number 2. Ashley.
Number 2. So I'm Ashley Jerome. I am the youth educator at Peninsula Temple Bethel, and I am working predominantly with teens, 8th through 12th graders. And what brought me here is, to learn more. Inclusion is something that's very prevalent, and I want to make sure all the kids that I'm working with, feel accepted and that their needs are being met.
Great. I'm changing your name too so we can see.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
How about that? Let's go. Rachel, Elephant.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I also work at Temple Sinai Preschool with Bob and Christine. I'm one of the teachers in the 4- and 5-year-old classroom. I think people have kind of already said it, but being able to identify needs and then figuring out how you should address them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best for the kid.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Kara, you're up. Trying to unmute you. Oh, hold on. We can't hear you. Do you have a microphone plugged in? Okay, there. Now try.
Okay. I'm Kara.
Hi, Kara. Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you. I work for East Bay Play, work with kids who have autism. And the start of that journey was a workshop with David at Bethel. And I was excited to see that he was doing a series. So I just thought it'd be a great way to expand my knowledge. And I'm starting grad school. So I have to get into the groove of learning. Again.
Very, very exciting stuff. That's great. Excellent. Thank you. Glad you're here. Maddie, your turn.
Hi, our internet just plugged out like 3 minutes before our call, so I'm on my phone. Hope that's okay. I'm Maddie. I work at Urbanata Ma. I'm the Youth and Family Programs Director and Camp Director here. And we are trying to become a more inclusive camp, particularly by training our staff and figuring out what infrastructure we can change to meet all kids' needs. So I am excited for more learning opportunities.
Excellent. Glad you're here. Anna, it looks like you're unmuted, but I'm not sure I've heard you yet. If you speak, hopefully we'll hear you. Tell us who you are. Are we there? No? All right. Well, Anna, I'm not sure if you don't have a mic or if your microphone is not put in, but we cannot hear you.
Yeah, she's there. She's there. I'll go check in on her.
Okay. Thank you. How about Harriet? Should we see if we can hear you now? Harriet? Can't hear you either. Okay, you may just be you can communicate with us via chat. Harriet is an independent Jewish educator. She lives in Marin. She has learned with me a few times and is kind of now doing more sort of private educator stuff, B'nai Mitzvah training, things like that. She has been in the community for a very long time and is lovely. So that's it. Okay. Rachel, do you feel up for speaking to us, or are you feeling not so hot about talking? Okay, you're typing. So we can all see. Did everyone just see the orange window pop up? So it says she has 2 roles at JCCF Rosenberg. Is there anybody that is not able to see that chat? If you don't see it, raise your hand. Okay. So we do. So she's the child development specialist and she works at JCCF Rosenberg, has also been one of my main contacts there, and I will be there next week doing a training with them on the toolkits. Oh, and there's Harriet typing to us all. That's okay, Rachel, totally understand. You're not feeling good. It's fine. I just want to make sure that, you're able to talk when you want to via chatting is fine. So welcome.
David, Anna and Katrina are joining Ashley. I don't know why my laptop is not working, so we will be a group here.
Okay, we'll go with it. So Anna, since you're here now, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for the people that don't know you who are sitting next to you.
I'm Anna, and I'm the director of Gan Matov Preschool. We go infant toddler to pre-K, and yeah, we're here to learn. I have Katrina here with me, another teacher from Gan Matov.
Okay.
We're just...
Yeah, so I'm Katrina, and I work in the mixed age class from 3 to 5 years old. And our class this year, I noticed that we have different kinds of learners. So I think this workshop will be helpful for me.
Great. Excellent. Glad to have you here. Okay, how about Randy? I'll unmute you and you can tell us a little about yourself if you have a mic. Randy, are you there? No? Okay, so Randy, if you can hear us, here I'm going to type in Katrina, Ashley, Anna in the order that we see you on our screen, so that way everyone knows who you are. So Randy, I'm not sure if you can hear us. No, there you are. Okay, great. Tell us who you are. Assistant Director Rosenberg. Got a nice Rosenberg contingent here. And what made you interested in coming to this particular workshop today?
There is a Michael Barkov, but I don't.
All right. Well, as you type it in, we'll see it. So, all right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you all. Oh, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise, so I'm going to mute everybody again. So give me one moment. Okay. Yeah, so all that I would say, so I've just muted everyone again. So definitely feel free to unmute yourselves when you want to speak. Again, it's just that little microphone down at the bottom. But sometimes it can be hard when there's noises in the office and things like that. So that's why I did that. But definitely feel free to unmute and speak up when you want to. All right, so I'm going to share a screen with you now, which is kind of the presentation that we're going to be basing on today. So let me just get this open and then share it with you. Here it comes. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that. If somebody cannot see that, please unmute yourself and tell me. And you may notice at the bottom there's closed captioning happening underneath the slides. This is an experiment I'm trying. It's best practices to have closed captioning and captions for folks that might not be able to hear. But I have not used it on Zoom before. It's like an automatic captioning thing. So we'll see how it goes. So here's what we're here to talk about today: differentiated instruction and special needs. Can everybody see that okay? Yep. Great. If anyone can't, just let me know. And you might need to do it verbally because I don't have the chat window open right now. All right, so here's the agenda for today. We're going to start out with a little bit of a teaching, as we like to do at Jewish Learning Works. Then I had a little exercise I was going to try, and we'll try it out and see how it goes. That's the God Empathy section. Then we'll go into discussion of learning styles, teaching styles and techniques, and hopefully at the end we'll have some time for questions. And we'll be out of here by 3:30. So that is that. Now, start out with the teaching. Is there anybody that would like to read this for us? You don't have to worry about the Hebrew, just the English. Maddie's gonna.
I can do. Oh,
Thanks,
wow!
Maddie.
You can see.
I can. I saw you. By the way, just so everybody knows, if you see a little picture on the right hand side of your screen, up at the top of that column, you'll see sort of a small rectangle, a square, 4 rectangles together, and a big square. If you hit the 4 rectangles together, it'll give you a little gallery view of everybody who's here. So that's how I saw Maddie. Go on.
Except for that, we're no longer on the. There we go. There are 4 types among those who sit in the presence of the sages: the sponge, the funnel, the strainer, and the sifter. The sponge, who soaks up everything; the funnel, who takes in at this end and lets out at the other; the strainer, who lets out the wine and retains the dregs; the sifter, who removes the coarse meal and collects the fine flour.
Yes. So thank you. So this comes from Pirkei Avot. So who among here has kids or themselves that this reminds them of? Who can think of a sponge that they've had in their life as a student? Yeah, a few of us. Anybody want to share a little something about your sponge, Bob?
Well, I'm just going to say they're all sponges.
Yeah, you're with the little ones. Little ones are especially sponge-like.
Yeah, and it never amazes me what they retain too. Like I've thought that they wouldn't think, remember certain things, and weeks or even months later they bring up something that happened, and I'm just like, oh wow, it did. They were listening.
Mhm.
So I think they're all like little sponges.
Amazing. What about a funnel? Someone who takes it at one end and lets it out the other. Well, no matter what you say, goes in one ear and out the other. Anybody have any of those in their lives? Yeah, I see Maddie nodding. So you want to tell us about the person you're thinking of? You're eating also, so I won't make you do that. Anybody else want to share?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was unmuted. There was a camper this summer who I think was 5 years old, and it was just very clear that he was hearing everything that you were saying, but then would only do some of it. Or it was like, kind of like, I hear you, but then I'm going to still keep playing with this, or, you know, that type of thing.
Yep, absolutely. How about a strainer? Someone who lets out the wine and retains the dregs. So you're just dropping beautiful pearls of wisdom, really like amazing, wonderful things, and all that sticks is the least important detail of anything that you were talking about. All right, I see some nodding heads. Anybody want to tell us about a strainer that they know? No, that's all right.
Sometimes me.
Sometimes you, yeah. Well, that's one interesting thing about this, right? I mean, I think, you know, we might recognize this in ourselves. I think sometimes we see, in autism, we do sometimes see some strainers, right? Who, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, and kind of what gets focused on is maybe the least important thing. Sort of a challenge with not seeing the forest for the trees. We see that quite a bit. You know, like, you know, you're talking and all they notice is something about your shirt, or also, you know, when sensory stuff comes into the mix, when there's lights or sound, or, you know, earlier on before you all got here, outside of Temple Sinai, there was some like beeping from construction, and I was trying to like discuss with my colleague here, and I had to mute it because that's all I could focus on. Right, so we all have that. How about the sifter? Removes the coarse meal, collects the fine flour. Anybody know people like that? Really hangs on to the best stuff. Yeah. Anybody want to share? Okay. So I think we all know that, right? The other thing I want to say about this, you know, who are the sages here in this scenario? Who are the sages that we're talking about?
The children?
Not the children.
Not the children.
It's all of you. It's the educators, right? It's us. We're the sages here, right? So all these children are here with us. And which of these four types do we have the obligation to serve and to pay attention to?
All of them.
All of them, exactly, right? Any other initial reactions to this little bit of text here? Do you think the kids are like this always, no matter what, or have you noticed? I know for myself, there are sometimes that I'm more of a sifter, and sometimes that I'm more of a funnel, right? Certainly, as I was growing up, I was much more of a sifter around English and languages, and much more of a funnel around math. I don't know if anybody here has had any of that kind of experience themselves. Some things really stick and some don't. Anybody have that they want to share?
Personally, or a child?
Either, but personally is good. We're all there together.
Yeah, I think, you know, all of them, you know, applies to, I think at least myself, you know, sometimes some things just soak right in, and I think it depends on how it's presented sometimes. And sometimes I think it depends on what's happening, you know, like you said, if there's a bunch of distractions or something like that, sometimes, you know, you filter just what's important, what's not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I think I mean, at least speaking for myself, I think a little bit of everything,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Yeah.
depending on different situations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel the same. Kara, I saw your hand before. Something you want to share about that?
I mean, I definitely see all of these in the kids that I work with, but also myself, and it also kind of depends on the dynamic that's kind of happening with the child. So sometimes, and then I have to be aware of that too, of what I'm presenting.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
I definitely see this playing also out in the relationship of how I'm working with a kid.
Mm-hmm. Say more about you have to be careful with how you're presenting.
I think that sometimes if, let's say, it's a really challenging day, then I could maybe just notice the things that aren't very important because I'm not totally present.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yes. And a lot of things factor into that. I know for me, when I'm tired, I'm a lot less present. I'm also a lot more irritable. Like if I didn't get enough sleep the night before or something. And I noticed that certainly around it happens less at work, because at work I sort of feel like I have to be on and aware. But with my family, sometimes I kind of, can be not totally present, especially when I'm really tired. So something that I look out for myself, because I do become a funnel. They're talking and I don't hear anything, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's important, so I think we all have these possibilities. Okay.
Yeah. I was just
no,
gonna
go on.
say, yes, I do have that too, where like sometimes if it's just the monotony of it, like if it's the same thing every day, like 100 times a day, sometimes I get a little shorter than, answer in a way that is probably not the best way sometimes, instead of, writing it through and, yes, we'll bake a cake. Yes, we'll make a cake today. Yes, we'll make a cake for daddy or mommy.
Yep, definitely. Great. So I have a little exercise I want to try. Does everybody have somewhere near them a piece of paper and a pen? Anywhere around?
I got a whiteboard.
Yes.
Okay, whiteboard will work. Okay, are you on a desktop or a laptop computer?
I'm on a laptop.
Okay, great. So I want to see what happens. So we're here today to talk a little about learning styles. So I want to see what happens if I limit you to one learning style. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a little drawing here. Nobody freak out. It's not. I know drawing can stress people out. This is not. No one is judging anybody's artistic ability. This is purely an exercise to sort of get us thinking about this stuff. And I'm going to do it too. Okay. So essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you some instructions. And Bob, you might have to get up and go to your whiteboard, and that's fine. And anyone else that has to do that can also do that. So I'm just going to give you some instructions. And I want you to draw what I say. Okay. So the first thing that I want everybody to do is take your piece of paper, if you have one, and turn it sideways. So it's in the landscape orientation. And then I want you to take your pen and, starting from the bottom of the paper around the middle, draw kind of a triangle that goes up to a point and then comes back down again. Okay. And if everybody has done that, then a little bit below the point of that triangle, I want you to make a little squiggly line that connects the two sides. Once you've done that.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. Good thing we have plenty of time, right? See, this is one of the things that we talk about, right? Oral instructions sometimes aren't the best for everybody. So after you have the triangle, a little bit below the point, make a squiggly line that connects the two sides.
And okay. I don't get it, but okay.
Do your best. It doesn't matter. No judgment here. Now, I want you to go a little bit down the side of the triangle and kind of draw sort of a circle or an arc of a circle that goes out from the left side, comes up over the top and around, and then back to the right side of your triangle. Okay, everyone had a chance to do that? Okay. So now, sort of at, intervals around the circle, just put kind of like diagonal short lines going out from the circle. All the way around. Not like every, just a handful of them around the circle. And on the upper left and the upper right of your paper, make a little oval that's squiggly, one on each side.
Squiggly.
And finally, down in sort of the lower part of your paper, to the left of your triangle, a little bit out, make a couple little things that look like carrots. You know the carrot sign, the little like up down carrot sign, carrot C-A-R-A-T that you use in writing, but with a little curve in the side of them. 2 on the left, 2 on the right. It's like a little point.
Okay.
All right. How's everybody's drawing looking?
Mine looks beautiful.
You want to see what mine looks like? I'm going to hold this up and then let's see how close we match.
Oh.
What do you see?
I'm way off. I'm,
What brave soul wants to show us what they came up with? All right. Nice. Uh-huh. Can everybody see? Let's go down to the Gamma Tov trio. Can you hold up your uh-huh. Oh, who is this? Who is somebody here with a striped paper? I can't see your face anymore. It's you, Ashley. Looks a lot like mine. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. Anybody else? Christine, what did yours end up looking
Oh,
like?
this is Anna.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, Bob, you're going to show us
I
yours?
don't know if you can see my tragedy.
It's a little far. Can you get any closer?
Let's see if I can get you guys a little bit closer
I
without.
think we have a sense.
Let's see.
Okay. Oh, you're just kind of cool. All right, excellent. I think we can all see that. So great. Okay, so we have some drawings that have some in common, right? And depending on how rigid I'm being in my grading, you either passed or you failed, right? Tell me what that was like for you. Hard, easy, in between? What was hard? What was easy about it? Yeah, go ahead, Ashley.
Frustrating.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Some more.
Because I am the kind of learner that I have to see it, hear it, and experience it myself and be able to reflect back on
Yep.
what I'm supposed to do or have some kind of basis of what I'm doing. So not knowing what it's going to be was frustrating for me.
It's frustrating. Uh-huh.
I'm
Anybody
looking
else?
left and right, and I'm like, what am I doing?
Uh-huh.
I'm Kathrina, and I actually felt like excited about it, like not knowing how it's going to look like. I'm excited to see how everyone else is doing. Yeah.
Interesting. So in the same room, right? Somebody who found it really anxiety provoking and frustrating and someone that found it exciting, right? They teach together. They're sitting next to each other, right? Interesting. What else did anybody notice?
I noticed I don't follow directions very well.
Well, but that's not necessarily true. That was one kind of direction that was maybe not that clear, right? I
Yeah.
limited you to one modality, right? I said, I'm just going to tell you what to do. How many of you think it would have been easier if I held this up and said, draw this,
Yes.
right? Easier, right? So that visual, right? You know, it's cheating a little because this is art, which is visual. But what else came up for folks? I mean, Bob, I heard you say, I failed. I'm way off, right? I'm hearing I'm frustrated, right? This is a little nothing exercise that no one is grading, that nobody cares about, yet we still get those feelings of, oh man, I did this wrong. Uh-oh, oh, that's not what they wanted at all, right? And it's not your fault. Like, I didn't give you a lot of tools, right? So imagine what it's like for our kids when it actually matters, right? When they're expected to take in content. You know, with preschool, it's different, but even when they're expected to behave in a certain way, act a certain way, right? These stakes don't matter. We get stressed out anyway, right? What else did people notice about the similarities, differences, or what it was like for you? Just one or two more quick comments.
Like
I was-
felt- oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying, I found it confusing. Like every time you said something, I was like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I was like, wait, dude, I start in the middle, and then how do I draw a triangle if I draw a straight line? You know?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yep.
Like a
not clear.
squiggly oval. What is a squiggly
I know.
oval?
I could have said draw a cloud, but that would have been too easy.
Yeah.
No, I felt very anxious of, you know, and then I realized if I wasn't 100% present the entire time, I might have missed one word that you said, and then I was totally off.
Yeah. Right. And so
That's what happened to me. I missed the circle and then I was afraid to ask. So then it was just like,
Whoever asked you to repeat, I appreciated that person.
That was me. The one who was
Good thing I
confused.
said yes, right? Some teachers might have said no.
Yeah.
You got the drawing right.
No, I didn't.
Oh.
Anyway, I think you get the point, right? So I'm limiting you to one type of learning, one type of receiving information, and we see, even though we had a lot of features in common, you know, nobody, maybe Ashley, Jerome, nobody else had any, you know, like kind of exactly what I was envisioning here on my paper, right? And that's just, you know, such a clear example of the teacher has one thing and what they think they're communicating, and the kids may or may not get it. right? And so we want to arm ourselves with the tools to work with all different kinds of kids. If we were in person, there's a paper airplane version of this where everyone makes paper airplanes, and that's pretty fun. I also used to do it at camp with like make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich where people had to follow directions literally, and it was kind of fun what would happen. But anyway, so that's just a little way to get us into this topic of learning styles. Any last comments before we move on? Anyone that's dying to say something? No?
My
And those
drawing's
of
the
you-
best.
Sorry?
Nothing.
Those of you who don't have cameras or microphones, if you type in the chat box, I will see it because I can access the chat from here too. So feel free to chime in if you'd like. Okay, so let's talk about learning styles. So there's the big three that probably most of us know about. What do you think I'm thinking of when I say the big three?
Auditory, visual,
Sensory, visual,
Auditory, visual, and
sensory.
kinesthetic.
sensory, kinesthetic. Exactly.
That's the word I was reading.
Right. So these are the big three, right? These are the ones, they've been in the literature for a long time. One thing that I want to say about this idea of learning styles, a lot of people take the position that these things don't exist. And I think the reason that they take that position is because the way it's been conceptualized is that kids can only learn in one way, or even predominantly learn in one way. That's not exactly the case, right? I think many of us will learn better in one modality than another, right? Auditory is really hard for people. Sometimes visual is hard, sometimes looking and copying this, might be hard or might be really easy, right? So it's not that you have one learning style and that's the only way you can learn. It's not even necessarily the best way that you will always learn, right? But there are tendencies. And I do think that some of us tend to, learn better in some ways than others. Right. And so I just want to say that up front. So, I'm not trying to be like dogmatic about this. It's just a way of thinking about how kids learn in different ways. Okay. And you more than one can be present in the same kid in the same moment. So visual learners. Well, as you might imagine by the name, visual learners are folks who tend to learn best by looking at or reading things, right? Seeing something in front of you makes it easier to understand. Children with autism, for example, are often really good visual learners. I've been in many of your schools and talked to many of you about how important I think visual schedules are, right? That's one reason for it, because having like visual schedules up on the board really cues in. And that's not to say every kid with autism learns best visually, but we do find that kids with autism do tend to have really strong visual memory and visual learning abilities, and maybe hearing it when you have to tune into the subtleties of somebody's eyes or their expression or their tone and what they're communicating socially is hard, right? Visual tends to be simple, clear, concrete, right? I see the words, I see the drawing, I'm gonna make that, right? It would have been interesting if I said to you all, make a mountain scene, right? With a sun and some clouds. It would probably all have looked different, right? But if I say make that, probably mostly you'll make that. Right? So that's one thing to think about. Auditory learners, that's the second. As you can tell by that name, that's kids who tend to learn best by hearing, right? Listening to things. So, anybody that found that activity where you were just having to follow the instructions by listening to my words, that might mean that you are a pretty good auditory learner. Those of you that were completely lost and confused, as I probably would have been, right? Maybe that is not as easy, at least not in an art situation, right? It might be something else if I'm giving you a dictation, if I was like an English teacher or something, or speaking words to a prayer out loud, right? Or teaching you the call and response that we're going to use in our preschool classroom when we need everybody's attention, right? Those are all ways that we learn things auditorily. Those kids tend to be tuned into conversations, tuned into sounds, and remember spoken directions, right? Some people are really good at remembering that. And for some people it's harder. Kinesthetic learners is the third one that people mostly talk about. Kids who are kinesthetic learners tend to remember best the things that they do and the things that they experience firsthand, right? So we talk about that a lot in your classrooms as well. How important it is to have active ways of learning where kids can engage their bodies, right? Kids who are really kinesthetic learners, especially in a real traditional kind of classroom, not preschool is a little bit different because it's mostly play-based anyway. Certainly the preschools that are here today are play-based. But those kinds of kids can often be restless and inattentive, and they benefit the least from methods like lecture and individual reading as they get older, right? Because really what they need to do is go, right? Little kids like live in this world, right? The preschool set, especially the 2s and the 3s and the 4s, live in that world. As you get to be 4 and 5, you start to like figure it out a little bit more, and you can focus for longer periods of time. There's a reason that we see a lot of play-based preschools, right? Because that's how kids learn, getting things into their bodies. All right. And we talk a lot about bodies in preschool, keeping our bodies safe, keeping our friends safe. There's a lot about that. But we tend to think less about it when it comes to religious school or when it comes to teens, right? Because they should know better, or they should be able to sit still, but actually not all of them can, right? So this is the thing that is important to not lose just because a kid is older than 5, right? Action, right? Kids with ADHD, for example, often do really well with kinesthetic experiences. I know I've done trainings with some of you about ADHD, oral instructions especially, or a long list of instructions given out, or doing what I did to you, where it was like, do this pretty quickly without pausing except for once when someone requested, that's hard. That's hard for kids with ADHD, because to hold all that in your brain and remember what to do can be challenging. So, but kinesthetic experiences clue into that part of that kid's sensory process and opens up their body to learning a little bit more, usually. Kids with sensory challenges, same. Kinesthetic stuff is often really good for those kids. That's why we have sensory tables. That's why I give out fidgets and wiggle cushions, because when people are able to engage their bodies, it frees up their brain, right, to focus on other things. So those are sort of the big 3. But there are more. Does anybody know of any other ones that you can pull out of your memory banks offhand? Just out of curiosity.
Isn't there like the music learner? I feel like that's a thing.
Music learner, that could be a thing, yeah. Learning from music. Okay, well, here we go. So music is a specific kind of modality that might be good with auditory. I realized there was something that I skipped that I meant to do before, which was a what do we know and what do we want to know? So we'll just pass that for now because we're already in it. But the next thing is global learners. That's another sort of big category. Has anyone ever heard of a global learner before, or this idea? So it's less well known. So global learners are students or kids, whatever you want to say, who see the whole forest, in quotes, right? The context, or the technical term for that is the field, is the key, right? It's really about making connections between things and looking for patterns in relationships. Some of this starts in preschool, where kids are noticing, oh, these things happen together. Certainly later, there are kids who can really kind of expand outward and see those connections. That's one kind of learning, being able to see how everything fits together, right? And those kids are really interesting. They may even see things that you don't see, right? My own kids, when they were young, living in sort of the total present, they're still young now, they're only 8 and 5, but when they were even younger, they would notice connections that I totally missed. Oh, I see, there's this shape over here and it's the same as over there, or this looks like a bee turned, upside down, just things I wouldn't have noticed, right? Because kids are taking in everything, little ones especially. And as they get older, some kids do that and some kids go another way, which we'll talk about in a minute. So global learners tend to learn best by relating new material to their own experiences and to things they already know. Right? We see this a lot in religious school classrooms, right? One of the challenges as kids get older is making content relevant, right? Having it connect to things that they know that they care about. And that kind of, scratches the global learning itch, right? So that is I think of a class I was in one time where teachers sometimes who are really good at this, it's really nice to see. Somebody was bringing up something about, I think they were talking about taking care of the world and taking care of animals. And somebody started talking about their dog, right? And the things that they do for their dog and the things that their dog does for them, right? What do I provide for my dog and what does my dog provide for me? And connecting those things. And then other kids started to piggyback on that. And then suddenly we were off on a whole tangent talking about dogs, right? Maybe related or not related to taking care of the world and taking care of animals, right? But that was everybody making connections. And what the teachers do who are tuned into this are then able to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about at first, right? Yeah, these are all the different ways in which we have an effect on the world and the world has an effect on us. Where else might that apply? Say we're talking about Haknasat Rahim, like welcoming guests or visiting the sick, or any number of Jewish mitzvot that we all talk about all the time, right? Or Jewish ethics, I guess mitzvot technically, or other things. But, how those things can be connected, right? Analytical learners is another piece of that. Analytical learners is a little bit different. These are students who see an object as separate from the surrounding field and, for example, see the trees, right? Kids who really like to notice or can notice the small details and maybe get really into those. People who get really into those, who like dates, who like, chronologies, who like all the different details. There's, the Torah portion about how you build the ark, is just filled with like minute construction details. Some people think it's really boring. Some people find it really fascinating, right? Because it's that kind of step-by-step thing. We look at the details first, right? You notice the details, you move from the heart parts to the whole, and then you prefer accurate and detailed information about specific tasks and content, right? Kids who like to have things very sort of clear and laid out. People who like to have things very clear and laid out, right? Is this, any of these resonating with anybody here so far as we're talking about them? Yeah, I see some nodding heads. Anybody think of themselves more as a global or an analytical learner based on these little descriptions here? Or both?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, say both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like making connections between different things, and like you explained, I've seen that in children too, and them pointing out things that I've never noticed before. Just simple things, but I never looked at it from their perspective, and it's like, oh, wow, I never thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Anything else on that? Was there someone saying? Okay. So kids with autism are often analytical learners, right? That goes along with the forest for the trees analogy, right? So we see that a lot. Kids on the spectrum, like not everybody, but typically there's a real need for routine, sameness, understanding how things go, and a real fondness for the details of things, right? Which they will often like talk to you about ad nauseum, right? Things that maybe you are less concerned about the details of, but for them it's really meaningful. So we see that quite a bit. And then there's two more we're going to talk about, introverted learners, right? So introverted learners like to think things through before starting a task or answering a question. Introvert means, we use it typically to talk about how we are in social situations. Are we a little bit more comfortable in big groups, or do we like to be alone or in smaller groups? And this extends to learning, right? So sometimes there are kids who really learn best by thinking things through before just going, right? They need a moment to process, right? They want to process their ideas internally before they share out to a group, right? I mean, I think we all in these group settings, when somebody like me is asking a group of people to volunteer an answer to who's a stranger in your life, right? Sometimes people sort of like clam up a little bit because they don't want to be the first to speak, or they need to think about it a little more, or they're worried about making a mistake if they just kind of like start talking, right? So that it's that same kind of stuff, but with all other types of learning too, right? Just like some time to process internally. When they don't understand something, they might prefer to watch somebody else do it before trying it themselves, right? Let me see how you do this, right? And let me try to, because that gives you distance, that gives you space, right? And that gives you a model that you can then kind of, if you don't know what to do, base your thing on. I see someone is sending a chat. It says, this might be a tangent, but how long have these learning types been used in education? Jargon aside, I'm wondering how long schools have used this language. That's a great question. So I think they've been used for a while. I think the learning styles stuff came into definition really in sort of like 70s and 80s, I think is when they first sort of appeared. They had a really big heyday for a while, and then people started to push back against it. It started out with those first three: visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Actually, you can even, if you look up like VAK learning, you'll find a bunch of like, websites that have curriculum based on that, right? It's since been expanded, and I think as a whole, what we end up doing is, as educators, the more experience you get, you end up pulling from everything, right? So you maybe you take a workshop like this, and some of it resonates with you and some of it doesn't, but you're able to pull that in, and maybe you don't think that kids really learn in all these different styles, or predominantly even in these styles, but you might still bring it in. And I think the field has done that about learning in general, right? Yes, there's a lot of other things out there. Can we bring them all in? Bob, you look like you had a question.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I kind of see introverted learners kind of almost, at least for me, the way I see it, because they kind of, I don't know, applies to me, to the kinesthetic learners. Like I like to, if somebody shows me how to do something, I can do it. But if they just like tell me, oh, you just do this, blah, 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 you know, I could get it if it's a few processes, but I found a lot of times I have to make lists if it's just a given instruction rather than if somebody shows me how to do it, I can do it. And I was like, I've never really, I mean, I've heard these terms before. I remember when I was doing classes and stuff, but kind of forgot about those other, but yeah, I think I'm a very extroverted person, but I think I'm an introverted learner.
Interesting, right? You can have both of those things. You know, on the other side of,
Sorry,
Yeah.
one more question. How many like learning styles can one person have? Like, could one person, you know, have all these different learning styles and can be adaptable in that way, or other people like literally only have one, or a mix?
I don't think anybody only has one of anything. I mean, I think that's sort of that's the danger of this kind of a model, is that we start thinking that like this is the way somebody learns, and that's not the case, right?
Okay.
You know, much like, you know, we might pull in, if we're working with a kid, stuff that we know from the behavioral world, you know, to help them sort of like get through some tasks that have really, you know, concrete steps they just need to learn, you know. And we also might pull in something from the sort of relationship-based world, where it's really about tuning into each other's feelings and what effect what I just did had on you, and what can we do about that, right? We pull that in. You know, so I don't think that anybody has only one of these. I do think that people tend towards, you know, one or more of them, and maybe learn best in that way. It might vary by topic also, you know. You know, it might be that in one area, you know, getting up and doing is really the best thing. And it might be in another area, copying a drawing that I'm making might be the best thing, right? If we're trying to teach, if I'm teaching an art class, for example, you know, it's going to be both visual and kinesthetic because you're looking and you're doing, right? So this goes to sort of, you know, the larger message around this, which is that when we're teaching, and we'll talk more about this when I get the strategies in a minute, what we want to try to do is pull in things from all of this, right? Because the goal is not that every kid is engaged in every part of every single day all the time. That's never going to happen, right? It's just not realistic. The goal is that every kid will be engaged in some of what's going on every day, right? And especially as they get older and it's more traditional instruction, you know. So we pull in from all these various things. But you know, if I think about me in my life, you know, I'll talk about extroverted learners in a second. That's definitely what I am. You know, my stepsister, on the other hand, was a more introverted learner. She, you know, wanted to think about things herself and then, you know, speak. It happens also even in problem solving, right? Even outside of the classroom, right? I think about me and my wife, for example. You know, the way that I work through problems, you know, and try to figure stuff out is just by talking about it, right? And I don't really think that much before I speak all the time, especially in that context, right? Because I'm just kind of verbally working something through. And she can be like, can you just like stop talking for a minute and think, right? Before, you know, because that she sort of needs that, right? And it usually goes better when I'm able to do that, because when I can do it that way, then she can receive it more. Because otherwise it tends to be like onslaught of words, and that kind of makes her, you know, shut down a little bit. She's a highly sensitive person too. So a lot of words very quickly tend to kind of wiggle out a little bit. So, you know, so it applies to more than just learning, right? It applies to many other things. Extroverted learners, since we've been talking about it, like to think out loud, right? That's me, you know, I do think out loud. That works well for me. People who are primarily extroverted learners understand concepts best when they talk about them and prefer to have feedback from others to know how they're doing, right? You know, you'll see me, you have already seen me, and you'll continue to see me say, everybody with me? You got it? Anyone have a question? Right? Because like I need that to know if I've got you, or if I'm like boring you to tears or not making any sense, right? Or talking too fast, which if I am, by the way, tell me, because I do tend to do that. So, you know, so thinking out loud, right? And talking. People who are extroverted learners are often, it says usually is probably putting too strong a word, but often action oriented and like to move quickly from one activity to another, right? I'm also like that. That's what keeps me going, right? Other people, you know, like to really focus on one thing at a time and then move on, right? So
I have the bad habit of doing that, but not completing before moving on.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's when I'm trying to multitask too much, that happens to me too. I have to remind myself, like, I can close something, you know, I don't need to do all these things at once, right? Yeah, thank you. Sorry, it keeps going. All right. So any questions about those sort of overall styles before we kind of get into like what the techniques are around them? No? Okay, great. So we're gonna just talk about, what do we do, right? So here we're gonna try something, okay? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen in a moment, and we're gonna try something in small groups, okay? And I'll tell you how it's gonna work. Zoom has something called breakout rooms. Oh, it's somebody, I'm hearing an echo from somewhere. Okay. So what we're going to do in a moment is I'm going to split you up into groups, and I'm going to do that through Zoom. I'm going to put you into something called breakout rooms, and you'll see it when it happens. It always kind of reminds me of like the Harry Potter portkey, right? Like you're, I don't know if any of you are Harry Potter fans, but it's like you touch an old shoe on the hill, and then you get a pull on your navel, and then suddenly you're like whisked off to somewhere else. It's kind of like that. It's a little bit weird the first time it happens. So we're going to get into groups. And these are the questions that we're going to ask, and I'll put these in the chat window as well, so that you have them. After this conversation here, in your groups, and we'll just take a few minutes, I'll have you ask, what is your predominant learning style? Do you always learn best that way, or only for certain topics or at certain times? And then thinking about your own teaching, which some of you have already mentioned, right? Are there ways in which your teaching style reflects your own predominant learning style, right? Do you tend to do the kind of lesson that you would learn best? And are there times that works well for you and times that it doesn't? Those are going to be the questions that we're going to answer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And so what I'm going to do is take those words and put them into the chat box so you see them. So give me 1 second to do that. Okay. Here they are. Okay. So you'll see it. It just came there. Starts with, what is your predominant learning style? Right? Everyone see that, hopefully? Okay. So I'm going to put you into these breakout rooms. What's going to happen is you'll be in the rooms. I will try to do it so that we make sure that people that can speak are together with people who can't. But it might just take I was going to do it. Okay, so I'm going to do this manually, and I'm going to just assign folks real quick. Okay, so we're going to put the three of you that are together in with Rachel and Randy. Great. We're going to put in breakout 2 Ashley, Bob, and let's see, Maddie. I'm trying to break up the teaching groups too. And in 3, I'm going to put the other 3 of you. Okay, so what's going to happen in a moment is I'm going to click a button that says open all rooms. You're going to get whisked off, right? And you're going to answer those questions with each other. I'll give you a few minutes, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes to just talk about it. And I might pop in and see how everybody's doing. And then after a little while, we're going to come back. What will happen is you will see on your screen something that says, like, rooms will be closing in 60 seconds. And it will count down, and then automatically you'll get whisked back into the central room. Okay? Everybody ready? Anybody have questions? All right, hopefully this will work. And I'll come in and pop in. So there's your questions on the side, and I'll see you in a minute. Here we go. You may have to accept to join.
Oh.
Sorry, I forgot to tell you that. So Christine, if you accept.
Is it me here? I join, okay.
Yeah, just hit join, and then you'll be in the room with the others. Are you there? Okay. Randy, it looks like you have to hit the join button too.
You're an auditory learner?
Yeah.
You guys just pop in to see how it's going.
Hi. We are just getting into
Mhm.
answering the first question.
Kinesthetic.
I definitely like a global learner,
Yeah.
but I tend to be an analytical learner of those things that are like of really like great interest for me. Like I want to like learn every aspect, learn all the details of the things that I find really, really interesting. I feel like I'm all these learners too. I'm an introverted learner as well.
I think all these learning styles are kind of a spectrum too, where we each have a little bit of it, and whatever we have the most is our dominant style.
Mm-hmm. So I hear you all saying sort of, oh, I'm a little of this, a little of that. Is it for particular topics, for certain times, certain like states of being in mind, or is it just sort of vary?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I'm trying to learn something and retain the information, probably visual, because I can go back to it and reread it and reread it. But I retain also, but maybe not that important things auditorily, like tell me and I'll hear you kind of a thing, and I will remember. But, yeah.
Great. All right. Well, keep it going. I'm going to go pop into another room. You got a few minutes left.
I was gonna say I'm definitely a kinesthetic learner.
Typical synagogue setting versus the preschools and the camps where you like the goal is to be outdoors, the goal is to be playing, the goal is to be doing, whereas like in religious school it's like sit behind a desk. Right, that's where you get a lot of the auditory and visual, I feel. So I like where Maddie, your struggle is the visual, I would say our struggle is more the kinesthetic, right? So
yeah, well, and I've actually have had children come back to visit the school, and I asked them about their schools where they're going to, their primary, and like, one of them told me they only had like one recess. I'm like, what for the whole day? I'm like, don't they need that? That's more inhibiting than it is helping. I mean, I don't understand that, how they can just have one recess.
I think like it really attunes to David. So like, okay, when you're over 5, like you expect more, right? Like your attention span is longer and those things. So that might have something to do with it too. I don't know. Also, I think the pressures of just like, we only have so much time to like get through what we need to get to.
True.
Like, the Hafsaka is going to be the thing that gets cut because they need like just that time to, learn the curriculum.
Oh, when I was a religious school teacher my first year, I would definitely be like, all right, we're taking 2 minutes off of Hafsaka.
Right?
But I didn't actually do it. It was just like the threat.
The threat.
And they weren't paying attention.
See, I was just going to say, did they catch on?
No. And like, would I do that now? No. But I definitely would be like, okay, this is your Hafsaka time. Like, we're just going to wait.
Right. Absolutely.
I was like 19.
I think people still do it. Like, it's not like an age thing. I think it's just the demands.
They do it. They do it in elementary school too. Yeah. I was just popping in to see how it's going. It seems like it's going well, so I will leave you to it. I'll see you later.
Stretch yourself and make sure you reach out to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered the questions.
No, I mean, I think it was fine. I find this question hard, like what is your predominant learning style? Because I feel like when I was in school, like in university, like I definitely visual, like when I'd have to like write down my notes and then read them and then write down my notes again and read them. And like, that's how I learned that best. But then also like, for example, like teaching, when it comes to like learning how to be a better teacher in the classroom, like a lot of that for me is like learning by doing. Like you plan a lesson or like you're working with kids and you did something in one way and you're like, that really didn't work that way. So like, I'm going to do it this way, next time. And like, that's definitely like, at least for teaching, like that's definitely how I learn best, is like learning by doing. But
Well, it's interactive, you know. I mean, you have your own ways, but because how you present the material works or doesn't, you know, you constantly interact and respond to the children, you know. So you have to take into account their response. If what
Right.
you do has no response, well, it
Right.
means you have to do it a different way. And as teachers, we do that naturally, you know.
right,
It's,
exactly.
especially with 3 years old, you cannot expectation of them, you know, like being just only visual learners or only one way or the other.
Yeah. And then I've never like, I mean, I feel like I've never planned, like thought about like a curriculum lesson where I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to be hitting all the learning styles. I feel like it kind of comes, I mean, I think maybe just as a preschool teacher, like the way you present anything, like you're going to tell everyone what they're going to do, but you're also going to like show everyone how they're going to do it. And then you'll maybe going to like break out into small groups. So then like when the small group's with you, then the kids like, if they're an introverted learner, like you can show them again, like how to do it. Cause like they're in a smaller group now. I don't know. I just feel like I've never consciously really been like, okay, this is how I'm going to hit all of the learning styles. I think it just kind of comes, hopefully.
Yeah, the way.
If David, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I
We
just
cannot
thought
hear you.
I was muted because I popped into your room. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just popping in to see everyone's doing. You guys are having a great discussion. But yeah, I think, you know, Rachel, that's people who are. It's not necessarily about, you know, like making conscious decisions to do it. You can figure it out naturally, but it can, you know, it helps to have the framework sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're doing a more formal lesson plan or something, you know, to be able to sort of do it. But yeah, it's useful to have them in mind anyhow. But you may just. Good teachers kind of do it instinctually, or over time learn to do it instinctually. You know?
And I think it's helpful to know the language, and then in terms of like recognizing it in a child, like realizing like what is the best way for that specific child to learn from what you've observed.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna go pop back out, and I'll send everyone a message, but like a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna come back together. Enjoy.
All right, that means it's Kara's
All right, so I see people are coming back in. Everyone else should be magically transported back inside here in just a few seconds. Oh, Maddie, you're on twice now. Your internet came back up. All right, I think we're all back. How was that for folks? Anybody want to share a couple points from their little Chavruta talk?
It was nice. It was nice to hear other people's experiences and to share,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this kind of setting, because I wasn't expecting to go into a little group that
Yeah.
it was even possible. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
Yeah, you agree with that, Bob?
Yeah, yeah. It was nice to just have a small little chat and kind of talk about different things, different children that we've experienced some of those learning styles.
Anything come up for folks around the styles or around kind of like your own? If you align yourself with one or more, do you teach that way too, or does everyone kind of try to pull from everything?
I feel like all of us said that we tend to do more of our own individual styles.
Mm-hmm. Interesting to think about that, huh? Yeah, because the way that you learn best might not be the way that all your kids learn best, but we all tend to do that. I mean, I kind of try to teach. I often teach the way that I learn. I have to remind myself to do other things. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, so we're going to move into the kind of like what are the strategies. I'm going to share my screen with you all again. Okay. So here we are back. Just need to get it. So play from current slide. Okay, there we go. Everybody with me? All right, so that's what we just finished talking about. So now we're going to talk about strategies. So we've talked about what these are. So now what do we do with this information, right? Well, for visual learners, what are some things that we can do? As we talked about in the beginning, keep oral directions short and simple, right? If you have a bunch of kids that learn visually, it's a lot better to deliver the information that way as well as with your voice. And when you do use your voice, short and simple, especially younger kids, but even older, right? That way, you are not kind of trying to hit them in a place that's hard for them. Give those oral directions one at a time. Right? Yeah. If there's a way to do that, because holding long lists that you hear and putting it all together can be really hard for some kids, especially if they learn best visually. Have them repeat the oral directions, right? The reason I keep harping on oral directions is because we as teachers give oral directions all the time, because we're not always in front of a board. We're not, so if you are doing that, have them repeat it back, right? So that you know it. Not every single kid that's a visual learner, but at least somebody. Or if you know somebody tends to do well visually, have them repeat it back so you know they got it. I don't know how many of you are responsible for teaching Hebrew, but one thing that helps with vowels, for example, which is often like really challenging for kids, is to color code them. So if you are ever doing that, there's the Hebrew vowel for which you can color in red, You can color in the Hebrew vowel for u, blue, e, green, o, yellow, a, aqua, and a, gray. On a worksheet. And if anybody is interested in this, I have worksheets on it that I could send you, color code and everything. So let me know afterwards. But that is a nice visual cue for kids to be like, oh, right, gray, that means A, right? So if you're doing Hebrew, that's a nice thing. Using visual aids and visual schedules, right? We talk about this all the time. In preschool, typically it's going to be pictures or symbols because no one's reading, right? But then older kids, when they are reading more, put the schedule up on the board and not only put it up there, but refer to it, right? Help kids walk through the day, right? And show them. I was in an after-school program yesterday, and they had a visual schedule up on the board, and the teacher realized that's one good benefit for doing it is the teacher was saying what the day was going to look like, and then she looked at the board and said, oh, I forgot to update this. I'm going to do that as soon as I'm done giving you directions. So she gave her the directions orally, and then she went over and she erased it and she wrote in what she had just said, and then everybody could see it, right? So use those things. For auditory learners, read directions out loud, right? If kids learn by hearing better than by seeing, you can read the directions out loud, and that will help. I will, by the way, send you all these slides afterwards. So I should have told you that in the beginning. So you don't have to write down every word. Write down points that you want to remember, but I'll make the slides available for you. Use music, songs, and trope if you're doing Hebrew often, right? We use a lot of music in preschool. We don't do it enough when kids are older, right? Earlier on, Rachel was mentioning kids that learn for music, right? And there are definitely kids who learn by listening to music, and it's a great thing to do. Reading out loud, another good thing to do for those auditory learners, right? Speak and demonstrate at the same time. So, that way you're doing a little bit of both. You're showing and you're also speaking, right? So that they can see it and they can also hear it. So if I'm gonna, hold up this drawing and give you the directions, I'll show it to you and walk you through it, right? Use clapping, drums, and bells for auditory patterning. This is most relevant to anybody doing language stuff. But anytime you can kind of help give a rhythm of the talk, it can make things easier. And bells are great for that too. Clapping, a nice advantage of clapping, and really even drums if the kids are doing it, is it also brings in some of the kinesthetic stuff, right? Because they get to do it themselves. Play Simon Says or Shimon Omer, right? That where they can hear a direction and do it. That's kinesthetic. It's also auditory because you're following, verbal instructions. Simon Says you don't write it on the board. For kinesthetic learners, well, might seem obvious, but allow time for students to move, right? They've got to have that time and to be able to engage their bodies, whether that means having breaks and hafsakah. I heard a couple of the groups talking about hafsakah and how that's recess, right? How that's like the first thing to go when kids are misbehaving and you're running short on time. You're putting your kinesthetic learners at a disadvantage if you don't give them a chance to move. And also, I would say even in class, right? We do that with younger kids, but even older kids, you can have stations that are in different places around the room. Something that's up high on the wall, something that's down low on the floor that they've got to walk over and get down on the ground and look at, right? Have at different levels, so they, even stand up on a chair and look at something, and then go over here on the floor and look at something, right? Whenever you're engaging their bodies. You can assign role playing or interviewing activities, older kids, right? Actually, even little kids, if you're role playing or a skit about how do you solve a problem, with sharing or whatever, because then kids are getting up and able to go through it with their bodies and experience it in a different way than just hearing you or watching a skit that you and the other teachers do or do with puppets. For Hebrew, tracing Hebrew letters on another student's back with fingers, right, is a nice kinesthetic activity for working on even basic Hebrew stuff so they can feel it. Similarly, making letters out of Play-Doh and things like that you can actually touch and feel is a great way to do it. Playing active games. I always come back to this example of bouncing a ball during vowel drills. Obviously, that comes from Hebrew, but I have a very strong memory pretty early on in my time at Jewish Learning Works of being in a classroom where they were teaching the vowels and the kids were in a big circle and they had a ball, right? I think Kara may have done this with me at Bethel a couple of years ago. They had a ball and they would, if you're familiar with Hebrew letters, the U vowel is a vav with a dot like here, where the belly would be, right? So you say ooh and toss it at the belly. The O is a dot over the vav. So you throw the ball over their head, right? And it's O, and E is under. And so you bounce it on the ground and say E. And I see somebody is trying to chat. What are they saying? Let's see. Okay, someone was just telling me they were in a meeting. Rachel also says, for younger children, blocks are a great way to integrate gross and fine motor skills and create learning while assisting the kinesthetic learner. Excellent point, right? Blocks are a great thing. Even older kids, right? Building stuff out of blocks is amazing. We had my older daughter who, for her 8th birthday, wanted a tea party, and we designed these games. I say we, my wife really designed the games, and one of them was a pyramid building project out of sugar cubes, right? And it was a really cool way to engage them, right? They were using sugar cubes because it was a tea party, so we had them, and then they used that to build pyramids, and it was a fun thing where everyone tried to build the biggest structure they could, and it gets into it gets into academic stuff of how do you put enough base support, right? But yeah, blocks are great for all of that. So thank you for that. I mentioned the clay and dough already. So for Hebrew letters, again, hand motions, clay, dough, or even students' bodies to make Hebrew letters. You do with English letters too, right? If you're working on any pre-literacy activities in preschool, mostly you are all play-based, but if there's kids who are interested in letters, right, that's a fun way to explore them is by making the shapes with your bodies, you and a friend making an L or whatever. I see a nodding head.
Well, no, I've had a few students who every now and then for snack time will have the pretzels, but the ones that are pretzel sticks, the little skinny ones.
Yeah.
And like just yesterday, actually, one of the children was like, "Look, Teacher Bob, it's if I put it like this, it's an I," or I've had them, different letters they spelled out with their pretzels. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that is an I." And so if you look at it this way, it's an H. So instead of like, "Oh, we don't play with our food," it's a learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's great. Yeah, I think there's always space for that. Okay, so for global learners, right? So relating new material to students' personal experiences or interests, that's the dog example from before, right? Take the material you're teaching and have it relate to the kids. We do this naturally in preschool. We do it less naturally as kids get older, right? Because we have content and things they're supposed to learn, right? But I think we can teach them that and relate it to them, and that will help those global learners who like those connections. Connecting new material to recent learning. So, I was in a classroom, I think it was a Hebrew class, where they were, talking about somehow the word kol came up, which means all, or everybody. And so they started to, and they had just gone over it in class before. And so they just started to do an exercise where the teacher said kol and everybody stood up, and then she said it again and they all sat down. And, so you connect the new stuff to things that you just finished talking about, right? Recently, make those connections. Use what's happening in the moment to teach a concept or a lesson, right? And I think that's the thing that we sometimes, when we're caught up in what we need to, the information that we need to impart, can kind of forget about, right? Especially with older kids. Like if kids are interested in, I don't know what, maybe, when the fires were happening last year, right? I mean, that's a sad thing, right? But, maybe that's a good time to explore, if you're in preschool, fires and firefighters and how they all help, right? If you're older, to help kids process, and if they're talking about it, to talk about what it's like and who are the helpers in the community that you can go to and things like that. Whatever's coming up and present for kids in the moment, use that to feed your lessons, and that, that way, even when a kid, I talk about this with challenging behaviors all the time, because a kid will come in with some off-topic statement, you're either to be silly or because they're not paying attention, and that makes teachers kind of crazy. But if you can kind of find a way to relate it back to what you were just talking about, then, and relate to what the topic is at hand, then almost despite themselves, they're participating in the lesson, right? And then it's less crazy making. Certainly, can happen with kids. It's very similar to what I talk about with kids on the spectrum. Use their interests in your teaching, right? Instead of making it something that's annoying, that this kid always wants to talk about buses, use it as a way in to talking about all the different ways that people, get around, and maybe they can make a project out of a bus that's like a learning bus, like the Magic School Bus, or something like that. And that something present in the moment becomes part of the lesson. Use cooperative learning techniques, right? When kids are like have roots of stuff, talking together, feeding off each other. That's great for global kids, because there's a lot of different perspectives they can kind of put together. For analytical learners, it's a little bit the opposite, right? You want to provide specific and detailed information, right? Let's talk about the dates, when this happened. Let's talk about all the parts that make up the arc, or let's talk about all the letters that make up this word, right? And get into the details of that. State the learning objectives clearly, giving the how and the why as well as the what, right? We do this for kids with ADHD as well, right? So that kids understand why we're doing what we're doing and how we're going to do it. Not just here's what's happening, but here's what's happening and here's why and here's how, right? Connect, right? And that will help sort of, someone that's more of an analytical learner be like, okay, I can understand sort of the point here, what we're doing. Allowing time for independent work, right? So you have some group work, you have some independent work. People who are analytical learners, that work tends to be better done like solitary. There's a reason that like people write dissertations on their own, right? Like, because it can be really solitary and lonely when you get into it, and you have to having written one, several years ago now, I remember, right? You get really into it because it's all analytical. Right. And it can go too far, and you got to get yourself back out in the world a little bit. But for the same thing for these kids, you allow some time for that. That's a space where you can get as deep into the details as you want. Right. Give students choices. So that's just about what do you want to do? Here's 2 or 3 topics to choose from. What resonates most with you that you want to think about on your own. For introverted learners, make time for silent reading in class, right? Sometimes reading quietly is easier for those kids. giving think time before asking them to answer questions. And this goes for kids that have auditory processing challenges as well. You know, you may yourself, or you may know kids who, when they're being spoken to, it takes a little extra time to take all the words, understand them, formulate an answer, and get it out, right? Introverted learners, it's sort of the same thing. I need to be able to think about this. So give think time, right? Give space. Don't expect an immediate answer from everybody all the time. Really helpful. If you have space for it, you can use private study areas. If you're working on something independent like that, that's great, because then, you know, they can be by themselves. Kids who get overwhelmed sensory wise, that's great for them too. Just, you know, go somewhere quiet to get away from it, inside a tent or in a quiet corner under a blanket or something. That can help sort of calm whatever might be going on for them because they're overstimulated. Allow students to work on individual projects, right? So we do a lot of group work, especially in religious school. That's great. Doing in preschool, it's mostly group stuff, but it's also nice to have space for individual, you know, room, which we do when we do art projects mostly, right? Everyone does their own version of this thing, you know, so having space for that, where you can do something on your own. For extroverted learners, encouraging whole class or small group discussions, right? So that, you know, remember, these are people that like to process things out loud. So you give the opportunity for that, right? And let that happen. And you know, we try to do a little bit of both. Sometimes that's whole class or small group, and sometimes that's individual. You can allow kids to do group projects, right? We just said for introverted, give individual time. For extroverted, do some group projects, right? Because then they can learn in a group. You know, that's the whole reason that Chavruta became a thing, was because when people were studying Torah, they would do it with a partner, right? And you bounce ideas off each other, and you figure it out, and you argue, and you debate, right? A place like this, we probably aren't arguing as much when you were in your little groups, but you were discussing, right? And thinking about things together. Using skits or plays is great. It's a very externalizing kind of thing. You know, it requires sort of paying attention to something outside of yourself, and it can really resonate for kids that learn that way. Let students give speeches or monologues if there's a particular project, you know, where they're presenting something. This is obviously for an older kid, you know, but similarly, have time in a, you know, what we used to call show and tell, you know, maybe in a circle time, one kid gets to bring something that means something to them from home and talk about it for, you know, a couple of minutes, right? And you know, talk about the thing they love with the group. Providing time and space for active projects, right? Extroverted learners tend to like to bounce around thing to thing and engage bodies. Sometimes extroverted and kinesthetic learners are the same, you know? It's similar things driving you. So having space for that. Other strategies kind of in general across learning areas. Mostly what it comes down to is give students opportunities to process information in more than one way, right? Visual learners, for example, and this again is thinking of older kids, might draw a diagram of information that they're supposed to study, right? Some way of getting it out visually. Kinesthetic learners might want to make a model, right? If we're talking about, you know, what the Knesset looks like, you know, the parliament in Israel, you know, somebody might want to draw it and see it. Somebody may want to make a model out of clay, right? Global learners can draw a mind map. That's those things where it's different ideas that you're connecting, and there's a circle in the middle that starts with the central idea, and then you bounce something off of that and another circle over here. Yeah. That's a mind map where you're connecting different things. Analytical learners can write a detailed outline, right? Let's break something down to its, you know, simple components. And the counterpart to that is let students demonstrate learning in their strongest style, right? The way that you know that they like to learn, maybe let them demonstrate their learning that way. So if, for example, in a religious school setting, you're talking about the events leading up to Israeli statehood, maybe a visual learner might like to make a series of drawings that have captions, a comic, right? I've seen people use like superhero comics. Superheroes are obviously very big right now, right? And make your own superhero, right? It's the same kind of thing. You're making a drawing and you're captioning it. Someone who's more introverted might write a report, you know? Somebody who is extroverted or auditory might want to present a group project in which they're interviewing people, right? You know, in preschool, you're not demonstrating learning so much, you know, because it's not that kind of academic learning, but let kids engage with each other and show their mastery of skills in different ways, you know, in different areas of class. There's no need for every student's project to be in the same format, right? We tend to sometimes, as teachers, get into this, like, here's what I want you to do, and you don't always have to do that. right? People can do things different ways. So I realize we're sort of out of time here. We're basically right at 3:30. And so if anybody needs to go, I totally understand. But this is sort of a time to just ask any questions you might have. Anything that's come up for you right now that we haven't addressed yet. Anyone have anything? We've answered it all. I have a chat question. Oh, Maddie has to go. Thanks, Maddie. I'm going to send an evaluation form after. Okay, so when you get that, please click on it. I'll put it in the chat box too, for those of you that stick around. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go too. I gotta start the
Yep. We're at 3:30.
but definitely enjoyed it. Definitely learned some things. I get kind of about myself, I guess, more than
That's great.
But through that, it helps gear toward, like you said, using different styles toward teaching stuff.
Excellent. So I like to end with this. Like, this is a quote from Proverbs: "Educate a child according to their way. Also, when they grow old, they will not stray from it." Right. That's what this is all about. Right. We're teaching kids the way that they want to be taught, and then we're giving them positive Jewish educational experiences. Right. So it starts in preschool. Right. That's the gateway. Right. So if we can do it starting then and continue, so many people have had such hard experiences because there was lecture or reading or stuff that didn't work for them. Right. So we really think about that. And then also, you guys all have my information anyway, because I've been emailing you, but just in case, if you need more information or want to talk more about any of this, that's my info there. I will send you a link to the evaluation form. I would really love it if you could fill it up. I'll put it in the chat box as well. I'm going to stop my share. If anybody wants to stick around and ask a couple questions, I can hang. Otherwise, thank you very much and enjoy.
Nice meeting everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Here's the evaluation link. Everyone needs it.
We'll get that in our emails, correct?
I'll email it to you. Yep.
Okay.
Along with the slides.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.